Hello, welcome to the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to write a comment. Enjoy watching.
The last thing I expected at 42 was to be uninvited from Christmas by my own damn family. But that's exactly what happened, and not in the dramatic, storming off, slamming door kind of way you might see in a Hallmark movie gone sour. No, it was quieter than that. Quieter and crueler. My brother Mark said it with a stupid smile, sitting at the head of the table like he'd just won something. He raised his beer bottle like he was making a toast, looked right at me, and said, "We don't need dead weight at Christmas." And then he laughed. Just laughed. Like it was some kind of inside joke I wasn't in on. I glanced around the table, expecting anyone, to push back, to say something like, "Come on, Mark, that's your sister." But no one did. My mom blinked slowly and looked down at her hands like maybe if she stared hard enough at her cuticles, she'd disappear. My dad took a long pull from his Bud Light and turned the volume up on the game. That was it. That's how it happened. I hadn't even taken off my coat yet. I was still standing there in the doorway, holding a tray of homemade cinnamon rolls and 2 bags of gifts, one of which I'd wrapped in the car because I didn't want to be late. I had made a blanket for my niece, hand-stitched every panel myself because I remembered she said she liked owls last summer. And for Mark's wife, Kelsey, who, by the way, once asked me if depression was contagious, I had put together a little self-care box with teas, bath salts, and a book about burnout. For my parents, I framed an old photo of them dancing at their 25th anniversary party. I scanned the original and cleaned it up in Photoshop because the corners were curled and the colors had faded. None of that mattered, though, because when Mark called me deadweight, I realized he wasn't just talking about this year. He was summing up how he's always seen me. How maybe they've all seen me. I remember standing there, still in my boots, snow melting onto their hardwood floor, wondering if I had imagined it. Wondering if maybe he meant something else, something less awful, and my brain just twisted it. But the silence in that room confirmed everything I didn't want to believe. They didn't flinch. They didn't correct him. They didn't care. I set the tray of rolls on the kitchen counter. I didn't say a word. I didn't cry. I didn't ask for an apology or try to laugh it off. I just turned around, picked up my coat again, and walked out. The wind hit me like a slap, hard and icy, but I kept walking. I didn't even go back for the presents. I wish I could tell you this was the first time they made me feel like a burden. That this was some isolated explosion from a family who'd always loved too hard or too messily. But if I'm being honest, and I've promised myself I will be, from now on, it was just the first time they said it out loud. When I got divorced, they barely asked me how I was holding up. My dad said, "At least you don't have kids to screw up." When I got sick, chronic fatigue, nerve pain, whole mess of things they think might be autoimmune, my mom's first reaction was to suggest I cut out gluten. They've always made me feel like my pain was something inconvenient. Like I could come around, sure, but only if I didn't talk too much. Only if I didn't take up space. Only if I was useful. Mark's always been the favorite. Star athlete, golden boy, the one with the big house and the nice car. Never mind that he's cheated on both his wives, run up more debt than a Vegas addict, and once asked me to co-sign a loan because his credit was so bad. Still, at family dinners, it was all Mark this and Mark that, and you should ask Mark for advice on getting your life together. Meanwhile, I was always the one bringing the food, cleaning up afterward, making sure everyone got home safe. But apparently that's not enough. I didn't look back at the house. I got in my car, turned the heat up, and drove. Not home, exactly. I didn't know where I was going, just away. Away from people who smiled to my face and rolled their eyes behind my back. Away from a brother who could call me worthless in front of everyone and still get offered another drink. Away from parents who raised me to believe that love was conditional and that I was always just one misstep away from being left out in the cold. I deleted the family group chat before I was halfway down the driveway. One by one, I watched the bubbles disappear. My stomach didn't twist. My throat didn't close. In fact, I felt something strange, relief. I didn't owe them explanations anymore. I didn't have to keep showing up with gifts, pretending we were a family. They made it clear. I was the deadweight, and deadweight cuts itself loose eventually. What would you have done? Honestly. If your own brother said something like that, and your parents just sat there, would you still come back next year? Would you still send cards? Bake cookies? Buy gifts for people who think your presence is a burden? Because I'm telling you now, when the people who raised you act like you're disposable, walking away isn't weakness. It's survival. And maybe this time, it's their turn to carry the weight. They always said family sticks together, but for as long as I can remember, I was the one doing the sticking, and they were the ones unpeeling me every time I tried to hold on tighter. It's funny how long you can convince yourself that love is hiding inside silence, how you can twist every slight, every absence, every eye roll into some broken version of care that you've decided to interpret as affection. For years, decades, if I'm being honest, I made excuses for them. I told myself they were tired, that they didn't know how to say the right things, that I just needed to be easier to love. But there comes a time, usually after one final slap of reality, when you realize the only one who's been trying is you, and maybe that's not noble, maybe that's just pathetic. When I was 9, I remember Mark getting into a fist fight behind the middle school gym because someone called him Mommy's boy. He broke the other kid's nose and still got ice cream that night because he stood up for himself. I got grounded once for crying too much after a friend moved away. My mom said I was making it about me. That's when I learned how to fold my feelings up like laundry, neat, silent, and mostly invisible. Mark learned how to make noise and get praised for it. I learned how to disappear and still feel guilty about it. As we got older, the dynamic didn't change much. He went from high school football captain to small-town business owner with a history of restructuring his ventures right before they tanked. I went to college out of state, got my degree in social work, and came back because grandma needed help and no one else could do it. Mark said he was too busy building something real to wipe drool off a chin or change an adult diaper. I did it for 3 years, every day after work, every weekend. When she died, Mark delivered the eulogy. He got the applause. I got handed her expired meds and a thank you card. It wasn't just the caregiving. It was the way they treated my time like it belonged to them. Babysitting his kids when he and Kelsey needed date night, loaning him money when he was between clients, cleaning mom's gutters because dad's back was acting up. They never asked if I had plans. They just assumed I didn't. And usually I didn't because saying no meant dealing with their guilt tactics, their passive-aggressive silence, their little comments about how some people just don't understand responsibility. And I believed it. I let them shape me into their emotional janitor, cleaning up everything they dropped without thanks or acknowledgement. I've spent over 35 years trying to be what they needed, which is wild considering I'm only 32. Did you catch that? Probably. But they wouldn't have. Because no one listens when the quiet one speaks unless it's to agree or offer help. And I had gotten really damn good at doing both. The truth is, they never really saw me. Not as a person. Not as someone with boundaries or hopes or the right to be exhausted. I was a utility. A backup plan. A failsafe. And the second I couldn't carry everything without cracking, they called me a burden. One bad Christmas, one skipped batch of cinnamon rolls, and suddenly I was dead weight. Like everything before that moment had been erased. New Year's came and went. No messages. Not even a forwarded meme. Mark posted pictures of a ski trip on Facebook, smiling with people who probably didn't know he had 3 maxed-out credit cards and a second mortgage. My mom shared a photo of her and dad toasting champagne in the kitchen. No mention of the daughter who used to refill their prescriptions and scrub their tub when their arthritis flared. I watched it all from a distance, not sad, not angry, just stunned by how easy it was for them to move on like I'd never been part of the equation. But here's the thing. I'm not staying silent anymore. I don't need to scream, and I'm not looking for a fight. I'm just done playing the part they wrote for me without my consent. I sent one message on January 2nd. Just one. It said, You'll see me again before next Christmas. Don't worry. No signature. No emojis. Just that one line. Because sometimes the quiet one doesn't stay quiet forever. Sometimes the black sheep grows fangs. Sometimes the weight we carry becomes the lever we use to tip everything sideways. They think they've shut me out. But all they've done is give me the time and clarity to remember everything they owe, and I'm not just talking about money. I'm done waiting for them to see me. I'm going to make sure they feel me instead. Revenge, when done right, doesn't start with fire. It starts with a flicker, a spark, something small enough that no one sees the match being struck until the whole room smells like smoke. I wasn't trying to destroy them, not at first. I wasn't interested in revenge just for the sake of it, not in the cartoon villain way people imagine when they think of a scorned woman with too much time on her hands. No, what I wanted, what I needed was balance. Not justice, not forgiveness. Balance. I wanted them to feel what it was like to lose control over a narrative they'd been scripting for decades, and I didn't need to scream to do that. All I had to do was stop protecting them. You'd be amazed how many secrets people forget they've told you when they think you're the quiet one. Mark, for instance, has always been full of himself, the kind of guy who brags when he's cheating the system, but then gets offended when you suggest he might not be a good person. I remember one dinner, probably 5 or 6 years ago now, when he was going on and on about how he managed to launder some of his gambling losses through this youth program he ran through the church. Technically, I'm not stealing, he said, laughing. I'm just reallocating poorly reported funds. I had laughed too back then, because that's what you do when you're the family sponge, always soaking up their filth so they don't have to see it float to the surface. But I remembered. I always remembered. So, in mid-February, when most people were still shaking off their holiday guilt or trying to keep up with doomed New Year's resolutions, I mailed an envelope to the church. No return address. No handwriting. Just a typed note with a few dates, some donation amounts, and a few well-placed words. Ask Mark about the program expenses for July through November. Then ask why he paid for a trip to Reno with church funds. Start there. I didn't even have to lie. The numbers were real. The receipts were his. 2 weeks later, the church newsletter stopped mentioning the youth program. 3 weeks after that, Mark's name disappeared from the Men of the Month highlight. Around the same time, my dad got a letter he didn't talk about, but my mom did because of course she did. She left me a voicemail I still have saved, her voice all shrill and shaky, accusing some nosy bitch of trying to ruin their lives by spreading lies about Jim's hobby business. Only it wasn't a hobby, and it sure as hell wasn't legal. My dad's little side gig fixing up cars in the garage had long since turned into a cash-only business that somehow never showed up on their taxes. I remembered helping him clean carburetors when I was 19. I also remembered him telling me, "You never report what you earn if it's paid in handshake money." Well, the IRS didn't agree with that philosophy. I sent them a packet. Photocopied flyers from swap meets, screenshots of online listings, even a PDF of an email thread where he bragged about flipping a classic Corvette under the table. It wasn't personal. It was precise. Surgical. No blood, just pressure. Enough to make breathing harder for them. By spring, the audit letters came. And if you think for 1 second that they connected any of this to me, well, that's the kind of blindness you can only achieve through years of believing your daughter isn't capable of anything besides cookies and pity. But it wasn't just the financials. I had other ways in, smaller threads I started pulling just to watch the unravel. Sunday dinner was the golden hour for them, their little oasis of normalcy. Every week, same table, same wine, same bullshit conversations. I knew because I had been part of them, quiet, dependable, overlooked. So I started tweaking the silence. One anonymous email to Mark's wife about a private Instagram account he used to follow women who didn't look anything like her. A wrong number text to my mother from someone pretending to be a pharmacist, asking if she was still abusing her husband's codeine prescription. Again, not lies. Just unlocked truths they hadn't wanted aired. I didn't burn the house down. I just opened the windows and let the smoke out. And sure, maybe a few neighbors started asking questions. Maybe the air got a little hard to breathe. But that's not arson. That's ventilation. Then, one night in April, rain pouring, thunder low in the distance like some movie director had decided to go all in, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number at first, but something told me to answer. "Sarah," he said, voice low and ragged like he hadn't slept in days, or maybe just hadn't had a drink. "What the hell are you doing?" I didn't flinch. I didn't lie. I let the silence stretch long enough for him to start second-guessing himself, and then I said, calm and clear as ever, "Cleaning house. Wanna help?" He didn't respond right away. I could hear the sound of him breathing, heavy and uneven, like someone realizing the floor had just given way beneath their feet. I didn't wait for an answer. I hung up. Sometimes silence speaks louder than confessions. Sometimes you don't need to explain the plan when the results speak for themselves. July rolled in like an old, drunk uncle, loud, sweaty, and full of bad ideas, and with it came the most pitiful invitation I'd ever received, if you could even call it that. It came in the form of a text message from my mother, 3 days before the 4th. No greeting, no apology, no acknowledgement of the firestorm I'd kicked up in the last few months. Just a single line that read, "We're having a cookout Sunday. You can come if you want. Bring that pasta salad people like." Not, "We miss you," not, "We want to talk," just a casual offer to return to the table like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't been effectively excommunicated the previous winter for having the audacity to take up space and breathe air they thought belonged to more deserving people. I didn't answer because honestly, what was there to say? Instead, I waited 2 days and then listened to the voicemail that followed, my mother again, this time in her syrupy, forced compassion voice. The one she used when she was trying to manipulate me into babysitting or forgiving someone without acknowledging what they'd done. "Sarah," she said, dragging my name out like it physically exhausted her to speak it, "I think it's time we all moved on. Nobody meant anything cruel. Let bygones be bygones. You know how your brother gets." Yes, I knew exactly how he got. I saved the voicemail and played it twice, just to let it burn in. Then I forwarded it to an old family friend, one of the few people who used to look me in the eye during dinners, who always brought wine and made too loud jokes that covered the awkward silences. I added a short caption to the recording, "Bygones equals calling your daughter a parasite." She didn't respond with words. She just reacted with a shocked silence when I saw her a week later at the store, and that told me everything I needed. People were starting to hear the things I'd been swallowing for years. Meanwhile, Mark's life was unraveling like an overused sweater. Turns out the gambling thing didn't just cost him his good standing with the church. It cost him his job. Word had gotten around that donations were disappearing, that funds weren't matching reports, and though no one ever said my name, I knew the storm had started with my letter. His boss had no choice but to let him go. And then, oh, the poetic timing, his wife decided she was tired of playing the loyal martyr while he pissed away their mortgage payment at slot machines. She filed for separation in early August, and by then, the mask he wore around town had already started to crack. He called me. Again. This time, he didn't bother with pretense or fake civility. He jumped right in, barking blame like it was his last lifeline. "You've ruined everything," he shouted, voice hoarse like he hadn't slept or had screamed at too many closed doors. "You just had to burn it all down, didn't you? Couldn't stand to be left out, so you made sure everyone else got dragged down with you." I didn't yell back. I didn't even raise my voice. I just let the silence stretch until he finally sputtered into it, then said, as calmly as if I were reading a grocery list, "You're mad at me for the affair getting out, but maybe you should talk to the guy who told his boss's wife about it at that charity dinner. Drunk, loud, and way too proud of himself. He was quiet. You remember that?" I asked. Because I do. I remember everything. That was the thing about people like Mark, they weaponized your silence and then were shocked when you used your memory. He had outed himself months before I ever lifted a finger. But when consequences came knocking, I was the only door he saw open. I didn't wait for him to argue. I just said, "You built the fire." I just stopped holding the extinguisher. And then I hung up. That Sunday, while they were all out trying to pretend the grill's smoke didn't smell like the bridges they'd burned, I drove out to the house I grew up in. The house where I learned that love was conditional, that approval was performance-based, and that the quiet ones were always left to clean the messes the loud ones made. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. I walked up to the front door, took out a small envelope from my coat pocket, and taped it right over the knocker. Inside was my childhood necklace, just a little silver locket my grandmother gave me before her mind got cloudy, the one with a picture of her and me baking cookies. It was the only thing I'd ever kept that tied me to that house with any warmth. And with it, I left a note. Handwritten. Simple. Keep the weight. I'm done carrying it. I got in my car, closed the door slowly, and didn't look back. Some things deserve your eyes. That place didn't anymore. Thanksgiving came quietly, like the kind of visitor who knows they're not really welcome, but shows up anyway, pressing its face against the window, fogging the glass, daring me to flinch. I didn't. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I didn't feel that awful mix of dread and obligation that used to gnaw at my stomach as the holiday approached. There was no turkey to prep, no casserole to transport, no fake smile to stretch across my face while Mark cracked tasteless jokes, and my mother pretended not to hear them. There was no invitation this year, not even a pity text or a backhanded message wrapped in forced politeness. And honestly, I was grateful. Instead, I hosted what I came to call Friendsgiving, though truthfully, it was more like a support group disguised as a dinner party. There were 8 of us in total, some old coworkers, a woman I met at a grief group years ago, 2 guys from my building who'd both been disowned by their parents for reasons that still make me angry when I think too hard about them. No one showed up in matching sweaters. No one brought wine out of obligation. Everyone came with a dish they'd made themselves and a story they were willing to share if the moment felt right. We ate in the living room, cross-legged on the floor, plates balanced on laps, laughing harder than I had in months, maybe years. There was a freedom in that space that I had never felt at my family's table, no judgment, no side eyes when someone dared to take seconds, no awkward silences when old wounds bled into conversation. At one point, after a round of toasts that included everything from to found family to surviving the worst year ever, I raised my glass and said it without thinking, "Here's to the Deadweight Society." They laughed, not because it was funny, but because they understood. Because every one of them had been made to feel like they were dragging someone else down just by existing. And now we were together, not dragging anything, just standing still for once, with no one pushing us into place. December came fast, and with it the kind of biting cold that settles in your chest more than your skin. I was drinking tea in my apartment, curled on the couch under a blanket I'd made for myself, no owls this time, just warm, thick layers stitched together from fabric that didn't need anyone's approval. The knock on the door wasn't loud. In fact, I almost didn't hear it over the wind slicing down the street like it was angry at the world. I opened the door and there he was, Mark, standing in his crumpled coat, eyes hollowed out like he hadn't slept in days, or maybe like he'd only just started waking up. He looked older, not in a dramatic, movie-style transformation, but in that quiet, unsettling way people age when they've been holding too much grief and resentment without the tools to unpack it. He didn't smile. He didn't bluster. He just stood there, soaked from the rain, hands twitching like he wasn't sure if they should reach out or stay buried in his pockets. "You won," he said, voice low and cracked like an old record. "The family's broken now. Happy?" I stared at him for a moment longer than I needed to, not out of cruelty, but because I wanted to make sure I remembered this version of him. No armor, no bravado, no audience to charm or intimidate. Just a man who'd finally seen the edge of the cliff he'd been pushing others toward for years. "No, Mark," I said, each word measured, steady, unshaking. I didn't win. I stopped losing. That was the truth. I didn't feel victorious. There was no trophy, no fireworks, no internal applause. There was only space, room to breathe, to think, to exist without being trimmed into something more palatable for their comfort. I didn't destroy them. I just stopped letting them devour me. He shifted his weight, looked past me into the apartment like he was waiting for an invitation that would make this all easier to forget. He didn't say the words, but his eyes asked the question. Can I come in? Can we start over? Can we pretend this isn't too far gone? I didn't answer. I just looked at him one last time. Nodded slightly, not a yes, not a no, just a quiet acknowledgement that I saw him, really saw him, and then I closed the door. Not slammed, not locked, just closed. And just like that, the weight finally shifted. But I still don't know if I dropped it or became it.